A particular sensation spreads throughout the body. Something fundamental is about to break, not to be destroyed, but to release what has been held for far too long. Perhaps in recent hours, you've experienced a sudden wave of fear, a pressure in your chest without logical explanation, or an abrupt awakening in the middle of the night without any visible cause. It's important to recognize that what is being perceived right now is not a figment of imagination, nor is it the product of a mind that cannot let go. What is happening at this moment is a resonance. A boundary has already been crossed. Energy knows this. The universe knows this. And that is why this message arrives today, at this precise instant, at the moment when doubt has begun to weigh too heavily. In this video, what will fundamentally shift will be understood with absolute clarity. Why the ongoing silence has never been synonymous with abandonment, and what kind of energetic decision is moving at levels the eye cannot perceive. Because even if it has not been spoken aloud, there is a deep fatigue within you, an exhaustion that stems not from sleeplessness but from waiting, from giving love without clear answers, from the feeling that time has stopped at the moment when a sign is most needed. And yet your presence here is not a coincidence. Despite the pain, continuing to search for answers to understand why this story has not ended obeys a higher purpose. If you feel this energy, write "I feel it" in the comments. It is necessary to speak with the most naked and most direct truth. This person can no longer endure. The structure of indifference and distance built to maintain control has begun to collapse under its own weight. There are bonds that do not break easily just because one side decided to flee. Because these bonds did not arise only from human desire, they emerged from an evolutionary purpose that transcends the will of the ego. When life brings together two consciousnesses destined to evolve together, the path can be complex, filled with obstacles and silence. But it is never meaningless. Even silence has its own language, a frequency that creates deep changes not visible now, but soon to be understood. The urgency of this message stems from the situation having reached a point of no return. This person has also reached their limit. Emotional exhaustion is not one-sided. It is mutual, even if it reflects into the world in radically different ways. On this side, uncertainty is processed with internal questioning or spiritual answer-seeking, while on the other side, there is a struggle within a deafening silence. While the question rises here whether it was worth it, involuntary memories that can no longer be suppressed begin to emerge there. And although the outward appearance shows that one is moving forward and leaving everything behind, at the energy level, both sides are being processed with the same intensity and at the same time. Life does not permit the dissolution of a true bond, not before bringing it to the exact point where the heart cannot sustain old behavioral patterns. Sometimes reaching the limit is not the end of the story. It is the precise point at which something more authentic and less fearful takes shape. Perhaps the recurring question was this: why did everything suddenly become so difficult? Why does what once flowed naturally now hurt? Or why did this person move away at the moment when everything seemed to align perfectly? The answer that the ego fears, but the soul needs to hear, is that there was no true rejection. It was an inevitable preparation phase. Love written in destiny is built not only with the emotion of the beginning, but with the maturity provided by surrender and truth. There were dynamics that could not continue the same way. There were attitudes that needed to break, deep fears that needed to surface, and emotional dependencies that could not enter the new phase destiny had prepared. The universe does not give what you are not ready to hold, and when the heart feels it can no longer endure, when the mind is tired of understanding strategies, and when the soul wants only peace, energy moves with the greatest clarity, not because a surrender is seen, but because the farthest point that can be reached as a human being has been arrived at. This story did not stop due to lack of love. It is being redefined, and this redefinition includes the decisions this person is taking right now, not from impulse, but from the intervention of destiny that no longer allows them to deceive themselves. But to understand why this collapse is happening precisely today, it is necessary to look beyond the mask of indifference, into that special space no one else can access. Watching how a human tries to deceive themselves when confronted with an emotion that transcends them is both fascinating and painful. Right now, if we could see this person's unfiltered reality, we would see a completely different scene than what fear-based imagination usually reflects. There is the illusion that silence is synonymous with forgetting, or that physical distance is an indicator of inner peace. The truth could not be further from this. The person occupying their thoughts is not at peace, and although they try to project an image outwardly of being distant, cold, or completely indifferent, inside continues a conflict they can no longer ignore. For a long time, this person tried to maintain a pre-prepared normalcy. They rise, perform their duties. They interact with their surroundings and smile when necessary. But a crack has appeared in this mask. The fatigue felt on this side first is now reflected there as well, not as guilt, but as a ruthless awareness. They are beginning to understand what was lost, what was avoided out of cowardice, and what could not be held at the right moment. Life allows the void to speak when words are not enough, and this void has become unbearably disturbing for those who flee. Attempts were made to fill this space with various distractions, perhaps excessive work, perhaps new and superficial friendships, or just the constant noise of technology so as not to hear one's own thoughts. But none of these work anymore. The void is no longer filled with distractions, with others, or with logical excuses, because when a bond is of the soul, nothing superficial can replace it. You can deceive the mind for a while. You can rationalize the escape. You can say it's for the best, or that it wasn't the right time. But you cannot deceive the heart forever. For those trying to forget, a destructive psychological phenomenon comes into play here: the failure of substitutes. Every time this person tries to connect with someone, or finds solace in activities that once brought them joy, they hit an invisible wall. Everything tastes bland. Conversations with others feel empty. Laughter comes forced, and intimacy feels mechanical. This happens because they experienced a different depth with you, and once the soul experiences this kind of recognition, it no longer settles for less. Perhaps at some point, you asked yourself whether your intensity was exaggerated, whether you felt too much, or whether you loved more than necessary. But the absolute truth is that you did not love too much. You loved from the right place. The problem was not in the intensity of what you offered, but in the temporal mismatch between two different internal processes. One was ready to go deeper. The other was still learning to face what they felt. This learning process the other side is going through is often painful, because it requires the person to see their own wounds by looking directly at them, repeating patterns and decisions made from fear. No one changes as long as everything is comfortable. Transformation only emerges when the current situation becomes too painful to want to repeat. That is why the silence lasted so long. This was not a punishment designed to make you suffer, but it functioned like a ruthless mirror, a space where everyone had to see themselves without the influence of the other, a place where absence speaks louder than any argument, and the question is no longer what the other is doing, but what I am doing with what I feel. Now memories are returning with renewed strength, almost violently. Simple moments that once seemed like insignificant small details weigh heavier today in this person's consciousness than any empty promise. Because when the soul recognizes its counterpart, it does not forget. The mind can try to block, rationalize, and flee in every direction, but the energy that is carved cannot be erased. This person is reaching a point of internal surrender. They may not yet be expressing it in words, but they are living it in every moment of solitude. There are sleepless nights that have become habitual, recurring thoughts circling in cycles at 3 or 4 in the morning. The feeling of something missing, even though everything seems normal in their outer life. This restlessness does not come to destroy the person, but to awaken them. The universe does not push aggressively, but at the same time, it does not allow a fundamental truth to sleep forever. When the right time approaches, conditions are set so that the heart has no way left to escape. And what is happening behind the scenes right now is exactly this. The initial rejection was a survival act of an immature ego, but the ego cannot endure forever against the commands of the heart. The internal war between the fear of suffering and the desire to love is reaching its ultimate resolution. This person is at a definite crossroads, to continue protecting themselves and wither in loneliness, or to dare to feel and bloom, even at the cost of losing control. And the scale is tilting slowly, but unstoppably, towards surrender. Not as a surrender to you, as if you were a rival, but as a surrender to the transformative power of love. And right here, in the middle of this silent and harsh internal war between the ego that wants security and the soul that demands expansion, a fundamental shift occurred in the energy that binds you both. A turning point that suddenly explains why everything feels different. In this universe, nothing remains unchanged. It operates according to the laws of balance and compensation. What is in this person's deep mind and shadow does not remain isolated in their head. A frequency sends a specific vibration. This vibration travels and directly affects your shared reality. The most defining and tangible phenomenon of the universe you are in right now comes into play here: the radical change of energetic polarity. To understand this, the recent past needs to be honestly evaluated. For a long time, the invisible dynamic between you operated according to a classic scheme consisting of chase and resistance. Perhaps without conscious intention, pushed by fear and anxiety of losing, you sent a massive amount of energy in that direction. There were messages, there was the search for answers, or there was just an obsessive and constant thought directed toward their presence. At a subtle level, this is perceived as physical pressure, like a wave constantly hitting a closed door. According to a basic law of physics, when a force pushes, the natural response of the body receiving that impact is to contract, resist, and withdraw to protect its own balance. As you advanced energetically, the other side instinctively withdrew. As you sought openness, the other side built walls of confusion. It became a tiring and painful dance where the roles seemed fixed and doomed to repeat forever. But recently something fundamental changed. You changed. Perhaps it was the result of extreme fatigue, the awakening of your own dignity, or a higher spiritual understanding. But the truth is that you stopped pushing. You began to withdraw your energy from the equation. There is no longer a stance on alert, desperately monitoring their movements. If you're taking your power back, write "I am strong" in the comments. Signals that serve them are no longer being sent from the outside, and although your thoughts still turn to the memory of the connection, they no longer carry the torturous pleading they once did. You began to focus on your own axis, to live your own life, and to prioritize your own healing. This act, which at first glance might seem like a sad giving up or a defense mechanism, actually created an absolute shock in the other person's energy system. By withdrawing the pressure, you created what is known as a magnetic void. Nature and energy do not love emptiness. They are in constant search to fill it. When you stopped covering the entire energetic field with your presence and insistence, an abyss of silence opened around this person. At first, this silence might have seemed like a relief to their ego, a false victory, or a sense of freedom. But this phase lasts very briefly. Quickly, the absence of your energy begins to feel not like freedom, but like coldness. This person had unknowingly become accustomed to feeding off your constant attention. Your energy was the fuel that inflated their sense of importance and security. When you cut off this source, the other side was exposed to emotional weather conditions. Now, a fascinating phenomenon is emerging. Because they no longer feel you behind them, this person feels an irresistible urge to look back. The energetic rubber band law came into play. The more you withdraw into your own center, the more the other side's attraction to you increases. Now, in this precise silence, they are really starting to miss you. They could not miss you before, because your energetic presence was everywhere. There was no space for nostalgia, but now that there is real distance, there is space for the memory to settle and take root. And this is not mental remembering. It is a physical sense of loss. This person is beginning to feel that something vital is diminishing inside, that an important part of their internal structure has disappeared. This polarity shift produces an unexpected result for those who flee. The weight of memory, because you were the one who maintained the connection with effort before, you also carried the emotional load of the relationship. You were processing the emotions, you were wrestling with the doubts, and you were keeping the fire alive. When you let go, you dropped this load. And this load did not disappear. It just passed to the other side. Now they are the one who has to carry the entirety of the emotional connection. Memories that they could once ignore suddenly become insistent and heavy. The emotions they suppressed suddenly crash down on them. Since you are no longer there to soften the fall, the indifference they showed before is beginning to collapse. They can no longer act as if nothing matters, because now they are feeling everything with intensified force. They feel your absence everywhere, like a phantom presence that follows them. At work, on the street, in the loneliness of their room. Paradoxically, even though you no longer insist, your energy surrounds them. This is the irony of the universe. By letting go, you bound. By stopping the chase, you began to attract. The energy you once used to try to break down their walls, you are now using to build your own stability. And this makes you irresistibly magnetic. This person perceives that your staying is no longer guaranteed under their control, that your life is continuing, that your light shines without their permission, and this frightens them. The fear of losing you definitively has replaced the fear of commitment. This energetic shift is real and tangible. This person is now standing at a point where withdrawal no longer brings relief. The internal tension grows with each day nothing is said. With each moment the urge to act is suppressed. What once seemed like self-protection now feels like self-betrayal. The inner voice that has been ignored for so long is no longer silent. It demands honesty, consistency, and action. Hesitation is now spending more energy than the courage to show themselves, and precisely because of this, the internal pressure is becoming unstoppable. Not from weakness, because the truth can no longer remain locked inside. It causes harm. What is coming now is not an impulsive step, but a necessary action. An action born not from fear, but from clarity. This story is moving toward a moment when silence no longer carries meaning, and distance has lost its function. Whether the words will be perfect no longer matters. What matters is only that they are spoken. Because what is real demands expression, and what is bound, sooner or later, finds its way back. The waiting ends here, not because someone forced it, but because the internal truth demands its place. To seal this truth, write "accept" in the comments.